It's time for us to check back in with Granny Hite and the 9 brides and see what happens next. If you've missed any of the previous readings, just look in the description below for a playlist. The Song Maple. The quilting fever was at blood heat, but days were passing. Soon the young zealous Elder Gatlin would appear in the hollow in his long-tailed Marion coat, sitting atop his saddlebags. The quilts had better be finished. The girls had reached a stepping rocks pattern which Travis Swisher eyed hungrily. Somebody saw, "You shall have it, Travis, but you must earn it. You must tell about you and Lee." "Oh no, stated Travis. "But Ellie has told her tale, and Kedron's hub has told his, and even Levacy Vasey has cut loose with hers, though it was hard for her." "What did they do that was so much?" scoffed Travis. "They did a lot. Ellie ran like blazes, and Kedron fell in a pit, and Levacy almost died. What did you do, Miss Smarty, to get a man?" "I sat," said Travis. There was a shriek of mockery. "Oh, you sat. Well, wasn't that wonderful?" "No, it was terrible. Suppose you explain." "No." Travis shook her head until the tawny hair bounced and the chinquapin nuts clattered at her throat. "If you want to know, ask Lee. He's at the store." A brace of girls went to the store and collared Lee McLeese. Pie was mentioned. Granny Hite generally had a few fresh pies baked for the quilters and other callers. Also, a remark was dropped about an old dulcimer which was at Granny's house. It had belonged to her Joel, and it had but 2 strings, and the girls were quite sure, they told him now, that he could never knock any musics out of that. This was a trick, of course. Everybody in the hollow knew fully that Lee McLeese could knock musics out of anything that had strings, his mother's Sunday stays, if need be. Furthermore, vowed the determined pair, Kedron Hardy and Laurel Tidnanny, his bride-to-be, Travis Swisher was waiting there at Granny's to see if he dashed to come and tell and show whether he was mouse or man. "Mouse, we think you are," taunted the 2-girl posse. "What a life you're in for with that hellcat Travis." "I can handle her," avouched Lee. "I've done it." "That's what we want to hear about." So Lee allowed himself to be led to the cedar cottage, though he was close to breaking loose and scooting. But in the house of merry needle pushers, with the rusty dulcimer of the late Joel Hite thrust into his hands, he plinked the long silent strings and gained confidence. He even raised his head and glared bravely at Travis, who glared back. "If I hit a chord now and then, I guess I can talk about it," decided Lee. He hit a chord, squared his shoulders. "Whatever he tells, I can lick him," stated Travis Swisher, stitching earnestly. This boy of a year ago had been 17, freshly lengthened out, still astonished at the new distance from his nose to his feet, stranger to his own godhood. The burden slung at his shoulder was a gourd, pinched to an 8 shape while growing in the field, stobbed with 4 sound holes, and dried and keyed and strung. It was not much of a music maker, but it was the 6th he'd worked up and the best he could afford, and now he was footing by ridge and glen to the house of Devil Tom Swisher, king of mountain dulcimer makers. Maybe Devil Tom would show him how to earn a real dulcimer built of wood and glue. The boy had come quite a stretch, so he stopped at a creek branch that coiled down over ferny rocks and spread out into a frothy pool. He drank, dabbled his dusty feet and shanks, and on impulse hauled off shirt and pants and forced himself in all over, gasping yet reveling at the icy bath, and lunging out he crawled about, Adam naked, after wild strawberries, laughing and cutting capers, and pleasured with the sun, the wind, the sweet May fragrances. He folded his lean legs, took the gourd dulcimer across his hard thighs, and with quill for plectrum, trickled an air that came to him out of nowhere as a cloud puff forms in a vacant sky. The song tossed off, he pulled his clothing on, shouldered his gourd, and sprang up. Devil Tom lived yonder in this wooded cove. He was not a man to be approached suddenly or in silence. 2 had tried and got killed, even with the power of the government behind them. So the boy filled his lungs and sent out a whoop with carry to it. A girl of 15 said quietly, "You're not to cross the run." She was seated across the stream on a beech-shaded hummock. On her lap a thing also lay flatly, like a dulcimer, but there the likeness ended. The boy cried hotly, "If your dress and face weren't so dirty, I'd have seen you." Appalled, "What were you doing there?" Orders. "I ought to thrash you for a sneak." Mortification shook him. "I don't thrash easy. Anyway, you're not coming over." "Who says it?" "This." She patted the firearm on her knees. The boy hooted. "Roosting there like a lump with a fat woodcock right over your head." "Where?" She sprang up and strained to see. He ran across in 2 bounds. The struggle was sharp. He was taller, stronger, and had just been made game of. He wrenched the rifle from her and held it high, but she was of the blood of Devil Tom. A basket full of cats and coals could not have held more fury. She tore at him, clutched for the weapon, pummeled his face, screamed, kicked. He caught her across his hip, ringingly smote the firm twin rounds of her backside, and followed the hand blows with thumps from the rifle stock. The smacks to her squirming seat redoubled her frenzy. She bit, gouged, butted. They battled all the way down the path. "What's this catawamption?" Devil Tom, as innocent-looking as a sinner as ever, hurriedly stamped fire out under his steel, stood beside his big wooden lathe. "Travis, hess your blether." "Grandfather, he snatched my rifle gun." "The more fool you to get tricked." He turned bleak eye on the stranger. "What do you seek, son, at the house of Dulcimer Tom Swisher? What's that contraption around your neck?" "It's a dulcimer." "It's a squash." "Well, if it's any kind of a music machine, strike it up." The boy tossed the panting girl her rifle and turned his back squarely on her, letting her see how lightly he held her, though he knew she longed to send a lead slug through his spine, and he could virtually feel it. His soul curled for shame of the naked antic he had cut before her eyes. "What are you waiting for?" roared Devil Tom. "I'll soon find out if you're on honest business. Play!" The boy, unnerved, sat down on a bench before Tom's draw-knife trestle. He laid his gourd on his knees and plucked and sang a carol of the mountains, though his hand was shaken, for he was afraid of this old man. "If every day was morning and every morning spring, I'd put a flower in my hat and do a highland fling." Recollection of his recent caper in the sun caused the boy to blush like a pecan root. Droop-mustached Devil Tom listened closely. "Play on!" He cupped his ear, being hard of hearing. "If every leaf was turning and fall was in the air, I'd make my girl some ribbon shoes and take her to the fair." The girl he'd rump-whacked stood her distance. No partner for a merrymaking, she. "Play on!" Devil Tom was stern of tone. "If every wind was winter, a whip with sleet and snow, I'd hie me to my sweetheart's bed and let the blizzards blow." The boy heard his words with dismay. This was not the song for the present moment. His hand froze. Stated Devil Tom, "It's a rare enough air and betokens some slight usage of the dulcimer. I heard it back in boyhood. How many verses do you know?" "I know 28. "That's one lie, and you probably have a lavish of more. The teetotal of verses to this ballad is 27. The teetotal is 28, and the 28th goes like this. If every kiss was promise, and every promise true, I'd seal my lips with balsam pitch and cut my tongue in two." "Where did you get that verse?" "Same place where I got this dulcimer. I went to the fields and made it." "Is there another?" "I've never found it." Old Tom, king of the dulcimer makers, viewed the instrument on the visitor's knees sourly. "That's an awful contraption for Tom Swisher's ears to hearken to. Throw it away. Heave it with all your might." The boy's heart surged. This was what he had come to hear, so he was to have a better. He whirled the homemade thing with a full sweep of his arm and let it fly. "Travis, you get into the house to your looming. What do you stand there for, feathering your eyes into him? What's your name, ballad maker, and where from?" "Lee McLeese, Cat Track Hollow." "Well, what you lagging around for? Jump to and grind this lath." Joy overflowing him, the boy grasped the crank of the 6-foot wheel, braced his feet, and turned. All summer he worked beside Devil Tom, putting his back, legs, and shoulders into the toil. He slept in the hay and ate in the house where there was no ornament to the log walls save dulcimers. Dulcimers 2 feet long, 3 feet and 4. Dulcimers 3-stringed, 4-stringed, and 6. The flat pinch-waist mountain versions of the lap harp had backs of maple and bellies of pine with fretted truss of walnut running full length atop each belly and ending in a fiddle curl for the holly pegs. In his lifetime, by rough reckoning, Tom had made 900 dulcimers. His signature was the maple leaf shape to the sound holes. 15 hours a day, Lee worked with the rougher tools. The rest of his time, save for eating and sleeping, he spent waxing and tuning the virgin instruments. Travis, unspeaking, kept out of his way, for which he was thankful, or she clapped his meals down before him, her head high, her lips scornful. His sharp shame for a memory never mentioned, and her spanked and insulted pride lay before them like a pair of swords. Devil Tom took Lee deep into the woods. They halted under a superb rock maple. Tom handed him a saw and commanded, "Climb." When Lee reached a thick limb at a giddy height, Tom called up to him, "Undercut close to the trunk, shear carefully." When the limb had crashed and he was down again, "Take axe and lop." The limb trimmed to a mighty beam, saw here and here. The logs dragged to the saw pit. Whoop them into another year's boards. Stocks of 7 years' sawing were already curing against the future's needs. Seeing those planks from the glorious tree, the boy grasped that he was beholding one of Devil Tom's precious secrets. Devil Tom confirmed it, stating, "I call that tree the song maple. My eyes and Travis's and yours are the only ones ever to see it." Lee's whip sawing finished, Tom led him back to the house. 42 dulcimers hung on the walls. All would soon go to the fair at Marionborough and out to the mountain world. Travis sat at her loom, her yellow hair shielding her turned cheek. Ordered Devil Tom to Lee, "Take from this room whatsoever you've a yearn for. Take it home for your own to Cat Track Holler. Claim and cherish forever." The shuttle halted in the girl's hand, then resumed its rhythmic march and countermarch. The boy had worked all summer for this moment. He tried to move to the wall slowly, as if the choosing called for study, but his feet took him fast and straight to a 4-foot dulcimer with 6 strings that he had long since marked for his own. His hand trembled as he touched it. "I'd be purely proud to have this if it's not bespoke for. There's nothing else in the room that you have it in head to covet? Think now, look wide. I can't use more than 1 grand dulcimer. It's all I ask." "Take it then, and clear out fast, for you're a lunk-headed mooncalf. Travis, get to your lookout," said Devil Tom. "I've work in the laurel." His back spoke no farewell. He didn't even glance Lee's way. The boy wondered if he had offended by taking the fairest dulcimer. He followed Devil Tom a few steps. "Uncle Tom, I'll put it back. The least of them all will be 100 times finer than my old gourd." Tom called harshly over his shoulder, "I told you to take what you wanted in that room. You chose." Puzzled, the boy stood in his tracks. He pondered. Tom was old, might never make another instrument with the magic of this. He concluded to stay by his choice. Travis, obedient to her grandfather, slipped out the door, back straight, step quick. She was on the other side of the creek fork when he got there. She posted herself close to the spot where he gamboled like a shorn and silly lamb on the day of his coming, and he faltered in confusion. But he recollected his victorious disarmament of her, the heavy-handed spanking, and he called to the gun girl defiantly, "I suppose you mean to tell me not to cross again, though this time I'm headed the other way." She didn't answer. Her eyes were on a red squirrel, high in a chestnut. He sprang for the midstones. One unexpectedly turned under. He beat his arms wildly, fought for balance, crashed. She watched the red squirrel teeter on its bow. Clumsy flounderings did not interest her. He regained footing. He stood knee-deep in the swirl, pouring the water from his dulcimer. He was angry enough to kill. "You set that rock a purpose." She smiled faintly at the whiskings of the squirrel. Her profile was clean drawn against the crimson sumac. Her brow was smooth, lashes curved, nose carven. He yelped, "You might at least lend me something to dry my dulcimer." She got up, brushed away the wrinkles at the back of her skirt, and moved off into the woods, a supple, agile figure. She disappeared. He waded to that bank, sank down, and frantically examined the instrument. There was no dent. He dried it with leaves and grasses and tried its voice. No ruin seemed to have been wrought, but his mood was black at her for this piece of malice. So that's a good place to stop. Very exciting today entry. Kind of makes you mad at all three of them. Devil Tom was certainly a mean old cuss. Travis seems like she was kind of mean too, but then Lee was kind of oblivious and he was also mean. They were all mean, all three of them. There at the end, it makes you wonder if Devil Tom didn't get so mad because maybe he was hinting to Lee that of all that stuff in that room he should have chose Travis. He should have chose her. That was the best thing in the room, not the dulcimer. So maybe that was what made him so mad. It wasn't that he picked the best dulcimer or one he didn't want him to have. He was just called him a lunkhead or whatever it was. I think he was just thinking, how dumb you are, boy. I said anything in this room and you chose a dulcimer when you could have chose Travis. So I think that's what that part was about. But he was definitely someone that was difficult to get along with. The Devil Tom, you can see why they called him Devil. But Travis also seems like she was hard to get along with. But then Lee was not that nice either because he grabbed her and spanked her. That wasn't nice at all. I liked at the very beginning, she says, when she shakes her head, he says he heard her chinky pin necklace, or that was previous to her meeting Lee. That was when they were in the, still at the Granny Heights at the Quilting Bee, when she shook her head no, that she wasn't going to tell him that her necklace, clinked together, chinky pin. So chinky pin is a little bitty nut. Think of a chestnut if you've seen a chestnut before, except smaller, about the size of your eyes. When I was a little girl, people would tell me that I had chinky pin eyes. And they used to grow everywhere in my part of the country and obviously in this same part of the country where they were at. And you don't find them as much these days. I don't think that, but maybe... I don't think, though, that it's the same blight that affected the mighty chestnuts of Appalachia. I don't think it was the same thing that caused the decline of the chinky pins. Maybe the spread of man, or maybe it was some sort of disease. But they are still found in certain places, but I don't have any right here where I'm at. I would love to have one. Sonny Rickard, good friend, he says that he has some, and he has them in pots, and he told me I could have one. I need to make sure and try to find one. And what about the instrument that Lee made out of the gourd? I really liked how it almost described it like maybe he'd went out while it was growing. It said he stobbed the holes in it for the music to come out. That's a good word, stobbed. We would use it like if you're going to poke or stab something, but stobbed. And then also you might stab your eye out if you're running with a stick. Those are different usages. But it sounded like he shaped it as it was growing. He had it, sometimes maybe that's happened to you. just accidentally, like maybe I'm growing a tomato where the tomatoes are growing and they get hung up against the wire of the fence or the basket or whatever you're growing in, and so then they kind of become like that shape. There's a line in them. They take on the shape. So it sounded like he was making the gourd grow in a specific shape. Makes me wonder what kind of gourd it was. Like, was it just one that was grown for gourd? But then Devil Tom says they're for sass, so it was an eating. It was something that they eat. Makes me think about the green and white striped cushaws that we grow. But I don't know that they seem like they have more tender skin. I can't imagine someone turning them into an instrument. Anyway, that part was really interesting, that he made that himself, because he was just desperate to be a musicianeer, to make music. So that was really interesting. I would love to have seen that. And then poor Lee, when he describes, of course he didn't know that Travis was watching him, and he, washes his feet off and then gets the water up on his shanks, up on his shins there, and then thinks, oh my, this feels so good, that he just took his clothes off and jumped in and really was having a big time until he, once he got all dressed, then he seen that she had been watching him. He was said mortification. He was mortified. So that part's kind of comical. If you've ever been in a ice-cold mountain creek like that, it is simultaneously so cold you can't stand it, but then so refreshing when I've been on camping trips like that. Now, I've camped by the lake and got in the lake to kind of take a bath. You're not really taking a bath, but to wash off, and that's usually warmer water, though. But way back up in the mountains, it's just almost, especially if it's not summer, I've done that before too, more than you can bear. But after 2 or 3 days of camping, you really want to get clean. And so I've dipped in those mountain creeks, and it's almost more than you can bear. But once you get out and you get your clothes back on, it is the best feeling in the world. You just feel so refreshed and so clean. I can imagine that's probably why a lot of people do the cold therapy. They say it's supposed to help all kinds of things, where they fill up their maybe a horse trough or something with ice and cold water and dip in that. But anyway, if you've ever done that, you know exactly what what that feeling is once you actually get your clothes back on and you're warm again. I wrote down some of the words in this one too. Now that stobbed, that was a good one that I mentioned just a moment ago. Of course, hearken is still in this one. There was another one I'm looking for that I didn't write down, but when I was reading it, I thought of. I probably can't remember what it was. Oh, feathering your eyes into him. He said, Travis, get back in the house and quit feathering your eyes into him. So I've never heard anybody say anything like that. But in all my research for the Blind Pig and the Acorn, I've come across, so if you feather into somebody, it's like if you were, if I was fussing with somebody and then I just feathered into them, means I just attacked them, basically. I just went after them, and started fisticuffs or whatever. So I guess the grandfather, or Devil Tom, was saying, your feather, I can see, like, she was mad because she was so mad that he had spanked her, Lee. So she was feathering into him with her eyes, when he told her to go in the house. So that was a good one, although I've never heard anybody say it. Avouched, I like that one when he said, used the word avouched, which is basically like a promise. It described the creek as coraled. The creek, before he got into it, was coraled over the rocks. So that's one that I grew up here, and not necessarily talking about a creek, but coraling. So when me and Paul were little, we got in trouble for coraling. Granny and Papa tell us to quit coraling. So we were fussing with each other is what we were doing. And then you think about that noise back and forth, and you can kind of see that you could say that a creek was coraling, that noise of the back and the forth and the water and the rocks. So I liked that one. Of course, once he got into the water, he crawled out to look for his strawberries and all that, he was Adam naked, it said. I've not ever heard anyone say that. We would just say naked, or naked as a jaybird, something like that. I've never heard that one, Adam naked. You'll have to tell me if you've heard that one. And then I think in one of the previous ones we were caterwauling was one of the words, or maybe it was in something else I was talking about. But so caterwauling is like a big loud noise. You think about people yelling or hollering or something, a big noise going on like that with people yelling. But Devil Tom said catawumption, so he was making it into a noun. I see we've got a little a little bug on our camera there. Catawumption, he called it. So he wanted, I like that he turned it into turned that, what I've heard is a verb, turned it into a noun, like something that was happening. And then he told her, of course, to hush her blether. So he was telling Travis, hush up, whatever it is you're fussing about. I want to know what this boy's doing here, and we got to find out what he's doing. And boy, Devil Tom worked him hard, didn't he? Worked him all those and made him do all that stuff, and really never, didn't sound like was ever kind to him. He just worked him. So we'll have to come back next week, though, to see what happens next. You know it doesn't end right there, because we got to remember it all started at the Quilting Bee Circle, so we know they're together. They're an item. They're offering to give Travis this quilt because she's about to get married, and she's going to marry Lee McLeese. So we've got to see how they end up together once he's on his way home and she's just took off through the woods. We've got to find out. Please leave a comment and tell me what you liked about this part of the book. And as always, I hope you'll drop back by next Friday.